Kristin Rossum was the epitome of brilliance. A gifted toxicologist with a sharp intellect, she worked at one of the most prestigious medical examiner's offices in San Diego. Her career was filled with potential. Her future seemed boundless. She had everything a young professional could hope for: a promising job, a supportive family, and a husband who loved her deeply. That husband, Greg DeVillers, was by all accounts a kind, devoted, and optimistic man. He was the type of person who saw beauty in the little things, who fought for love, and who believed in the strength of commitment. Together, they looked like a couple, straight out of a storybook, successful, happy, and deeply in love. It was November 6th, 2000, a quiet Monday in San Diego. The kind of day where the city moved along at its usual pace, people commuting to work, children playing in parks, and the ocean waves crashing gently against the shore. But in a modest apartment nestled in the heart of the city, something unthinkable was about to unfold. At 6:15 p.m., a call was placed to 911. On the other end of the line was Kristin Rossum, her voice shaky and uneven. She told the dispatcher that her husband, Greg DeVillers, was unconscious in their bedroom. When paramedics arrived, they found Greg lying on the bed. His body was lifeless, his skin pale. Around him, scattered like a scene from a tragic love story, were rose petals, bright red against the stark white of the bedsheets. Kristin claimed that Greg had taken his own life, consumed by despair over their failing marriage. She told investigators that she had tried to help him, that she had begged him to hold on, but it was too late. Her story was one of heartbreak, of a man who had given up on life because he couldn't bear the pain of a crumbling relationship. It sounded believable. After all, who would lie about something so devastating? Who would dare stage such an elaborate scene? And yet, something about the details didn't sit right with those who arrived at the scene. The rose petals, the timing, Kristin's calm demeanor. As the hours turned into days, the questions surrounding Greg's death began to pile up. Why would a man like Greg, full of life and ambition, suddenly decide to end it all? Why would he leave no note, no explanation, nothing for the family and friends he cared so deeply about? And why were those rose petals, so carefully placed, there at all? At first, the investigators threaded lightly. Suicide cases, as tragic as they are, often leave behind more questions than answers. But as they dug deeper, they began to notice inconsistencies in Kristin's story. Small details that didn't add up, moments where her timeline seemed off. And then there were the toxicology reports that would turn this case on its head. Greg hadn't taken his own life. Someone had taken it from him. And the method used to end his life wasn't just unusual, it was specific. A dose of fentanyl was found in his system. The kind of drug not easily accessible to the public. The kind of drug someone like Kristin, a toxicologist with access to a laboratory full of controlled substances, would know all too well. But why? Why would Kristin, a woman with so much to lose, commit such a terrible act? Was it desperation, fear, or was there something, or someone, else driving her actions? The answers lay in the web of secrets Kristin had woven around her life. A web that included a hidden relationship, a history of addiction, and a marriage that was unraveling faster than anyone could have imagined. And at the center of it all was Greg, a man whose love for Kristin never wavered, even as the world he had built with her came crashing down. As investigators began piecing together the truth, the story took on a life of its own. Kristin's affair with her married boss, Dr. Michael Robertson, became a key part of the case. It wasn't just an affair, it was an obsession, one that had pushed her to the brink and led her down a path of no return. But this case isn't just about love, betrayal, or even murder. It's about the questions that remain even after the verdict is reached. Could Greg's death have been prevented? Did Kristin act alone? And what drives someone to cross a line they can never uncross? Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on a case that captivated the nation. A case that revealed the darkest corners of human behavior and left behind a trail of devastation. This is the story of Kristin Rossum and Greg DeVillers. The story of a marriage that ended in tragedy. The story of a life cut short by betrayal, lies, and choices that can never be undone. Kristin Rossum had everything: beauty, brains, and a promising career as a toxicologist. Her husband, Greg DeVillers, was equally accomplished, a kind-hearted man deeply in love with his wife. Together, they seemed like a picture-perfect couple living the dream in sunny San Diego. But on November 6th, 2000, that dream was shattered. Greg DeVillers was found dead in their home, surrounded by a haunting display of rose petals. Kristin told authorities it was suicide, a desperate act by a man overcome with despair. Yet, nothing about the scene, or Greg's life, made sense. What followed was a case so bizarre, so layered with deceit, that it left investigators and the public questioning everything. Kristin's affair with her married boss, Michael Robertson, soon came to light. A forensic trail led directly to her. The rose petals weren't a poetic goodbye. They were the ultimate misdirection. As evidence mounted, it became clear that this wasn't just a story about a marriage gone wrong. This was about ambition, betrayal, and the devastating power of toxic love. But even with a conviction, questions still linger. What really drove Kristin Rossum to kill the man she once vowed to love forever? Could there be more to this story than we've been told? In the coming hour, we'll uncover the truth behind Greg DeVillers' untimely death, examining every clue, every motive, and every misstep in a case that shocked the nation. Kristin told authorities that Greg had been distraught, overwhelmed by the state of their crumbling marriage. She claimed he had taken his own life by ingesting prescription pills, and that the rose petals were a sentimental nod to their wedding day. But something about the scene felt off. Too carefully arranged, too deliberate to be a spur-of-the-moment act of despair. Despite the apparent grief in Kristin's story, her demeanor raised immediate questions. She was calm, too calm, some said, and curiously detached for a woman who had just lost her husband. Even more puzzling was her failure to call 911 immediately after discovering Greg. According to Kristin, she had tried to revive him herself, but by the time paramedics arrived, it was far too late. As investigators began piecing together the events of that morning, their doubts about Kristin's story deepened. A toxicology report revealed that Greg's body contained a lethal dose of fentanyl, a powerful synthetic opioid, often used for severe pain management in medical settings. The problem? Greg had no history of drug abuse, and there was no legitimate reason for him to have access to such a substance. Fentanyl wasn't a drug anyone could get their hands on easily, unless, of course, you were a toxicologist like Kristin Rossum. Working for the San Diego Medical Examiner's Office, Kristin had direct access to fentanyl and other controlled substances, a detail that didn't go unnoticed by investigators. Fentanyl is incredibly potent, 100 times stronger than morphine. A tiny dose can be deadly. For someone with Kristin's knowledge of toxic substances, it was the perfect weapon, leaving no physical signs of foul play and mimicking the symptoms of an overdose. But the question remained, why? Why would Kristin want her husband dead? And what role did the rose petals play in this chilling tableau? As police dug deeper into Kristin's life, troubling details began to emerge. Witnesses reported that Kristin had been struggling with personal demons, substance abuse, marital issues, and, most damning of all, an affair with her married boss, Dr. Michael Robertson. The affair wasn't just a workplace indiscretion. It was an open secret among Kristin's colleagues, a scandal that cast her in an entirely different light. Greg's friends and family vehemently denied that he was suicidal, They described him as a happy, loving man, deeply committed to his marriage, despite its challenges. Kristin's story of Greg spiraling into despair simply didn't align with the person they knew. As investigators delved into Greg's final days, they uncovered startling new evidence. Evidence that pointed not just to a crime of passion, but to a meticulously planned act of betrayal. The rose petals, the fentanyl, the affair. Each clue brought them closer to a shocking revelation. The affair itself wasn't just a scandal. It was a potential motive for murder. In the days leading up to his death, Greg DeVillers had reportedly uncovered the truth about his wife's infidelity. He confronted Kristin, demanding she end her relationship with Robertson and threatening to expose their affair to her workplace. This revelation marked a turning point, escalating tension in the couple's already strained marriage. According to Greg's closest friends, he was devastated but resolute. He wanted to save his marriage, even if it meant confronting Kristin's boss directly. For Kristin, this wasn't just a threat. It was a catastrophe. An exposed affair could mean the end of her career, her reputation, and her relationship with Robertson. But rather than face the consequences, Kristin chose a darker path, one that would change her life, and Greg's forever. As investigators combed through the evidence, they began to uncover the role Kristin's professional expertise played in Greg's death. The toxicology report revealed that Greg's body contained a lethal amount of fentanyl, an amount far exceeding what would be found in a therapeutic dose. Investigators immediately turned their attention to Kristin, who had both the knowledge and the opportunity to administer the drug. Kristin likely believed that fentanyl, with its fast-acting and hard-to-detect nature, would leave little evidence behind. But forensic science had advanced far beyond her expectations. Kristin had underestimated the power of forensic science and the determination of the investigators assigned to the case. Detectives discovered that the fentanyl used to kill Greg had likely come from Kristin's workplace, connecting her to the crime in a way that could not be ignored. But the evidence didn't stop there. Kristin's calm and collected behavior during the initial investigation began to unravel under scrutiny. Detectives noted her inconsistent statements. Kristin Rossum's understanding of toxicology may have helped her commit the crime, but it also became her downfall. Investigators pieced together a timeline of events, showing how Kristin had both the motive and the means to kill her husband. The carefully staged crime scene, the rose petals, a reference to her and Robertson's favorite movie, American Beauty, and the presence of fentanyl all pointed directly to her. In the trial of Kristin Rossum, the prosecution painted a picture of a woman driven by desperation and blinded by infatuation. They alleged that Kristin, caught in the unraveling threads of her affair and her failing marriage, made a calculated decision. Greg DeVillers had to be removed from the equation. The prosecution laid out a petrifying narrative. They argued that the rose petals scattered over Greg's body were more than just a poetic flourish. They were Kristin's attempt to stage a dramatic final act, inspired by her favorite film, American Beauty. But unlike the movie, this ending wasn't beautiful. It was brutal. One of the most damning pieces of evidence was the timeline investigators meticulously constructed. Kristin had worked late at the office the day before Greg's death, providing her with the opportunity to obtain the fentanyl. And the following morning, she claimed to find him unresponsive, yet she didn't call 911 until hours later. One by one, witnesses testified about Kristin's erratic behavior leading up to Greg's death. Colleagues from the medical examiner's office described how her once sharp demeanor had crumbled under the weight of personal turmoil. They spoke of her increasing absences, unexplained access to high-risk substances, and her blatant favoritism toward Michael Robertson, her boss and lover. But the most explosive testimony came from witnesses who revealed Kristin's struggles with drug use. Friends of Greg DeVillers testified that he had confided in them about Kristin's worsening addiction, which he claimed had put a strain on their marriage. Even more shocking were claims that Greg had been planning an intervention for Kristin, an act of love that prosecutors argued she interpreted as a threat. After weeks of gripping testimony, the jury deliberated for days. Finally, the verdict was delivered. Kristin Rossum was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom fell silent as the judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For many, justice had been served, but the case was far from over. Even as the gavel fell, Kristin maintained her innocence, and her defense team vowed to appeal the decision. In the years following her conviction, Kristin launched multiple appeals, claiming she had been wrongly accused. She alleged that key evidence had been mishandled, and that investigators had ignored alternative explanations for Greg's death. Her lawyers argued that the fentanyl could have been planted, and that Greg's death might have been a tragic suicide after all, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Kristin even suggested that her lover, Michael Robertson, had more to hide than anyone realized. But these claims left more questions than answers. Was Kristin Rossum cold-blooded, or was she a scapegoat in a complex web of lies and betrayal? To this day, her appeals continue to haunt the court system, leaving a trail of unresolved tension in their wake. The case of Kristin Rossum is one that lingers in the mind long after the trial ended. A brilliant toxicologist with a promising career, who, instead of using her knowledge to save lives, wielded it to destroy one. It was a crime that shocked not only because of its brutality, but because of the intricate staging, the rose petals, the calculated overdose, and the audacity to call it love. At its heart, this case wasn't just about murder. It was about betrayal, manipulation, and the dark lengths someone might go to when the walls close in. What was Kristin Rossum truly running from? The collapse of her marriage? The exposure of her affair? Or perhaps the haunting reality of her own unraveling psyche? Cases like these often involve elements of narcissism, desperation, and an overwhelming need for control. Kristin Rossum's actions suggest a person who was willing to gamble everything, her career, her reputation, her freedom, to maintain the illusion of a life she could no longer sustain. But beyond the sensational headlines and courtroom drama lies a deeper question. What drives a person to commit such a heinous act? Was Kristin Rossum a victim of her own inner demons? Or was she simply a cold-blooded killer who believed she was clever enough to get away with murder? More importantly, could Greg DeVilliers' death have been prevented? What warning signs were missed? What cries for help went unheard? And how do we, as a society, ensure that love never becomes a weapon for destruction? Do you believe justice was truly served in this case? Or does Kristin's story leave us with more questions than answers? One thing remains clear. The shadows of this case extend far beyond the courtroom, leaving us to question the fragility of trust, the cost of secrecy, and the dangerous games we play when love turns toxic. So, what do you think? Was this a case of a brilliant woman unraveling under pressure? Or was it something far more deliberate? Do you believe justice was fully served? Or does this case leave you with unanswered questions? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments below. Let's discuss. If you're captivated by unraveling mysteries like this one, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Your support helps us dive deeper into the cases that keep you on the edge of your seat. And don't forget to join us again as we uncover another crime that shook the nation. A story filled with deception, betrayal, and a twist no one saw coming. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.